All right, everyone, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are going deep on U.S. lease agreements and tenant rights.
Should be interesting.
Yeah, it really should be. We'll be pulling from the great podcast, Understanding Lease Agreements and Tenant Rights in the USA.
Great choice.
Yeah, they really know their stuff. We all know leases are legal documents, right?
Yeah.
But so many of us, myself included, maybe especially myself, sometimes just kind of gloss over the detail.
Yeah, you really got to pay attention.
Right, because they're not just like a formality.
Absolutely not. It's like, it's a contract.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it affects you like every single day that you're living there.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It covers so much stuff. You know, how much rent you're paying, obviously. What is and is not included. How long the lease lasts.
And what you can and can't do.
Right.
Like what happens if you want to break the lease early?
Exactly.
So let's say I'm moving into my very first apartment. What are some of the things I absolutely need to know about lease agreements before I sign on the dotted line?
Well, the first thing to remember is that it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
It protects both you and the landlord. And, you know, I think sometimes we forget.
Right.
We think of it as only protecting the landlord, but it protects you too. And that's why it's so important to have everything spelled out. You know, like you said, the rent,
Right.
the length of the lease when it ends, and what happens if either party doesn't hold up their end of the bargain.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So the lease can protect you from, like, I've heard these horror stories about landlords just deciding to like double the rent or something crazy.
Yeah, you hear those stories all the time.
The lease would protect you in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. The lease provides stability. It says, okay, for this period of time, you're going to pay this much. And the landlord can't just come in and say, actually, I've decided I want more money now.
Unless you agree to it, I guess.
Right, exactly. Unless you agree to amend the lease or sign a new one. So it really is like, it's peace of mind for both sides. You know the landlord knows you're going to be there. The tenant knows how much they're going to be paying. Everyone's on the same page.
So what about things that aren't explicitly written in the lease? I was reading about this thing called implied warranties. What are those all about?
Oh, yeah, implied warranties. Those are super important. So basically it means that even if something isn't specifically written in the lease, there are still certain basic rights that tenants have. These are things that are just kind of assumed to be part of the deal.
Okay.
Like, for example, the right to a habitable living space.
Okay.
That means that, like, no matter what the lease says, the landlord is legally obligated to provide a place that's safe and livable. You know, things like working plumbing,
Got it.
heat during the winter, no major infestation. You know, like, it has to meet basic living standards.
Right, like it can't be condemned or something.
Exactly.
So if my apartment, say, suddenly becomes infested with rats, I would have some recourse.
Yeah, definitely. Now, like a couple mice here and there, that's probably not going to cut it. But like a major infestation, something that makes the place like genuinely unsafe or unlivable, that's a breach of habitability. And you could definitely take action.
And when you say take action, what do you mean?
Well, first things first, document everything. Take pictures, videos. Keep a record of all communication with your landlord.
Okay.
Because if it does end up going to court, that kind of evidence is going to be super helpful.
Yep.
You know, shows that you tried to resolve the issue with the landlord and that it was a legitimate problem.
So to basically CYA.
Right. Cover your you-know-what.
Got it.
And then, depending on your state's laws, you might be able to withhold rent until the issue is fixed. Or you could even potentially sue the landlord.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
The Understanding Lease Agreements podcast mentions something called hidden clauses, like stuff hidden in the fine print that could really trip you up. What are some of those sneaky things I should be on the lookout for?
Oh, there are so many. It's crazy. But one of the most common ones is clauses that make the tenant responsible for all repairs, even like normal wear and tear stuff.
Oh, well, that seems unfair.
Yeah, it can be really unfair because, like, you know, if the roof starts leaking, that's not really the tenant's fault. But some leases will try to sneak that in there. And then you're suddenly on the hook for like a huge repair bill.
Yeah.
So watch out for that. Another thing to look out for is excessive fees for late rent. Like some leases will have these crazy penalties that are way beyond what's considered reasonable. You know, like a $20 late fee, that's one thing. But like $100, that's just predatory.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. So yeah, basically just read the lease really carefully. Don't just skim and sign. Like actually sit down and understand what you're agreeing to.
That's good advice for like any legal document, though.
Oh, yeah, totally. But especially leases, because it's like this thing that's going to affect your life every day. So it's worth taking the time to really understand it.
Okay, so read carefully.
Yeah.
And I guess don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yes.
If you don't understand something.
Exactly. Like if there's something in there that seems unclear or unfair, don't be afraid to ask the landlord about it. You have the right to negotiate certain terms before you sign. It's not like set in stone.
I feel like we've all heard this a million times, but it's worth repeating. Get everything in writing.
Oh my God, yes.
Right.
So important. And I know it can be tempting to just like trust a landlord's word, especially if they seem really nice and friendly. But like when it comes to legal stuff, it's just so much safer to have everything in writing. Even those like verbal promises that they make during a showing.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I'll totally fix that leaky faucet, or I'll repaint the walls before you move in. Get it in the lease.
Right.
Because if it's not in the lease, it's basically like it never happened.
Right, because then it becomes a he said, she said situation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just way too easy for a landlord to say, oh, I never promised that.
Yeah.
So yeah, get it all in writing. Protect yourself.
Speaking of protecting yourself, let's talk about tenant rights. Like, what are some of the things that landlords legally can't do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that a lot of tenants don't really know about. So like one of the biggest ones is the right to privacy.
Yeah.
A landlord can't just like barge into your apartment whenever they feel like it.
Okay, but like, what about if they need to like fix something?
Yeah, so most states have laws that require landlords to provide reasonable notice before entering a tenant's unit. Usually it's at least 24 hours, but it can vary depending on the state. So like if they need to do a routine inspection or something, they have to give you proper notice.
Okay.
Now, obviously, emergencies are different. Like if there's a burst pipe and you're not home, they can enter to fix it.
Yeah.
But for like non-emergency stuff, they have to respect your privacy.
Got it.
Yeah. Another big one is discrimination. Landlords can't discriminate against tenants based on things like race, religion, national origin, familial status, disability, or sex.
So they can't refuse to rent to me just because I have kids, for example.
Exactly. Or because you're a single parent, or because you have a disability. Those are all protected characteristics, and landlords can't discriminate based on them.
So if I felt like I was being discriminated against, what could I do?
Well, the first thing is to document everything. Just like with habitability issues, keep records of any communications, any discriminatory statements that were made, any actions that were taken against you.
Okay.
Because if you decide to file a complaint, you're going to need that evidence. And then you can file a complaint with HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Got it.
Or you can seek legal advice from a fair housing organization.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of stuff today.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest takeaway for our listeners when it comes to lease agreements and tenant rights?
I think the biggest takeaway is that knowledge is power. Like the more you know about your rights and about what to look out for in a lease, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to negotiate terms, to stand up for yourself. Because at the end of the day, it's your home. You deserve to feel safe and respected there.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so for folks who want to dive even deeper into this topic, what resources would you recommend?
Well, I would definitely recommend checking out the website of your state's attorney general. They often have resources that are specifically tailored to renters in your state.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah, because like we've talked about general principles today, but the specifics can vary from state to state.
Right.
So yeah, definitely check out your state's website. And there are also a lot of great national organizations that advocate for tenant rights, like the National Housing Law Project or the Tenants Union.
Awesome. We'll be sure to include links to all those resources in the show notes.
Great.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for today.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive on U.S. lease agreements and tenant rights.
Yeah, it was fun.
And remember, folks, knowledge is power. Arm yourselves with information and go forth and conquer the rental world.
You got this.
Until next time, stay informed and stay awesome.
If this podcast helped you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep making these videos. Thanks for watching.